Hello, Ben here. Hope you're well and welcome back to Benjy's Cafe podcast. Joining me in Benjy's Cafe this week is the actor, writer and comedian Steve Royle. Steve is one of the country's leading stand-up comedians, headlining regularly at the Comedy Store, with TV credits including Phoenix Nights and Max and Paddy's Road to Nowhere. Steve co-hosts with Jamie Sutherland the comedy podcast Finding Funnies. And in 2020, Steve impressed the judges and the British public, coming third in the finals of Britain's Got Talent. Christmas 2024 will see Steve complete his 21st consecutive pantomime at the Grand Theatre Blackpool, playing Buttons in Cinderella. In this audio episode, Steve shares insights and reflections on the craft of comedy, and we discuss the importance of kindness, working with Peter Kay, and the impact of Britain's Got Talent.
It's some lovely comments, very, very nice bit. And also because I did do it in pandemic year, people coming up to me. I've had grown men coming up to me going, "Oh, you were the best thing in COVID for me. You know, you got me through a difficult time."
Oh,
and
that's
making
brilliant.
me laugh. I mean, honestly, it really, it genuinely touches my heart.
Yeah.
You know?
Peter Kay calls him a brilliant comedian, and to me, he's a blooming good chap. Pop the kettle on and enjoy listening. Welcome to Benjy's Cafe, Steve Royle. Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm very well. I should just add to your little introduction there that in Peter's latest book, in his first, I think it was the second book that he wrote, and that's when he called me the brilliant comedian. And then in the most recent one, he calls me something that he just says comedian. So I don't have been demoted. I don't know if his opinions of me have changed. But if you read the chapter in the latest, I'm going, oh right, okay, I'm not brilliant anymore.
Well, Steve, I've worked with you twice, and I'm telling you, forget Peter Kay. Ben Harlow,
right.
character actor from the Midlands, is saying you are a brilliant comedian.
That'll do for me.
It's so good to see you, Steve. We worked together twice in pantomime, the Blackpool
Always
Grand.
a pleasure, Ben. Always a pleasure.
What a lovely theatre that is, and what a great experience is working with you. Your work ethic, your craft is so admirable. I think you should be so proud of that, Steve. Obviously, you love the genre of panto, and 21 years this year at the Blackpool Grand. You must absolutely love that, but it is a hard graft, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I mean, it's dead flattering you saying things like that. But you know what? And I think probably most comedians are the same. You don't notice it. I think, which is probably one of the reasons why it comes across so natural, really. People give me lovely compliments like you've just done there all the time. And sounds like I'm suddenly become a right big head. I get it all the time, that. How brilliant I am. No, but I just don't see it. Half the time, I don't like watching myself back. I really don't. And I find it very difficult. Do you know what? I've only ever seen the Britain's Got Talent appearance once.
Really?
Yeah, I've only watched it once. And that was with all the contestants when we watched it before the live results final in 2020. And we all sat down and watched it together. I did BGT in 2020, which was, of course, pandemic year. And so there were all kinds of restrictions, which I watch it. I mean, the series is on at the moment, isn't it? Just the finals week this week. And I kind of envy all the contestants. You see them, you know, appearances on chat shows and all this kind of thing, turn up at premieres, and it's a lovely experience for them all. But we didn't have any of that because we were in a lockdown situation, and so we were literally shuttled from a hotel into the studios, separate rooms, keeping the distance from everyone. There's so many restrictions, but again, the pandemic probably worked in my favour because people needed a laugh. So it's life, isn't it? That's life. It's sometimes, you know, things, you know, there's always a positive and there's always a negative with anything you do, isn't there, I suppose?
And that must have been really hard for you as somebody who's worked for years with a live audience in pantomime and on the stand-up circuit, Steve. I mean, did you have to tailor your act accordingly without that immediate response?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people go, oh, it was easy for your year because that year the semi-finals didn't go until September because they didn't know what they could do, whether they could have an audience, whether they couldn't have an audience, whether there'd be social distance, whether they could interact with the judges, etc. So people say, well, I had loads of time to prepare my semi-final and my final. But in actual fact, we didn't because we didn't know what we could do. So I had a semi-final that planned that I was going to teach David Walliams how to juggle. That was my idea for my semi-final. And then at the last minute, they said, we can't do that. So then I went back to all my old panto ideas. So I got the giant beanbags and stuff like that, things I've done in pantomime over the years. And when I worked at Camelot Theme Park as well. And I just put those into the show. you know what? Mentally, I went back to gigs where I've done a lot of corporate events, and anyone who's done especially award ceremonies and things like that, when you've entertained at these events, you're basically being ignored by probably 90% of the room. But there's always one polite table who look at you. And I went into this semi-final final because there were just the 4 judges and the Zoom cameras. I went in with that mentality. I can't hear them. They're just, most of the tables I'm going to ignore. I'll just entertain that one table there. And that's I suppose the mental state that I had to get in that got me through to the final and came third in the end, yeah.
And how lovely that you mentioned that even if, certainly in a corporate gig or any gig, I guess, Steve, that even if you're, putting a smile on, one table's face or a few people, that's lovely for them, isn't it? And that must be so rewarding for you.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you just appreciate them paying attention, because people can be so rude, especially at events where the comedy isn't central. Most comedy nights are great because the people are there for the comedy. But anything where a comedian's been booked, I've even done weddings. I've done a lot of weddings in the past. I did one wedding once, and I turned up, and I was a surprise. And the father of the bride was going, "Oh, I booked you. She used to come to see you in pantomime. She'll absolutely love it if you turn up." So the DJ just announced me, and I walked on, and this bride, I could see she was a bride. Obviously, she had a big white dress on, and she was sat at the bar, right? Always an indication what kind of bride she was, right? And I'm not kidding. When I walked on, she went, I saw her roll her eyes, pick up a chair, and turn it with her back to me.
No way.
That was, yeah. And then I just did about 20 minutes to just people go, I'm going, does anyone, I stopped after about 20 minutes and went, does anyone actually want me here?
Oh my goodness, Steve.
It was awful. I don't know, they forget that you're a human being, that you've got any kind of feelings.
It's so funny, isn't it, how different audiences can respond to you as a performer. And I guess you can have some nights where your set, your top gags can really hit, than others that when it just doesn't land, and that's not your fault, is it?
Sometimes in the same night, I do a lot of doubles. I think you do when you're doing comedy sets in comedy clubs. 20 minutes in one club, you'll open one club and then drive maybe 20, 30 miles and you close the other club. And when I do that, I've had occasions where it's been absolutely awful in the first gig, and drive 20 minutes later, do exactly the same material, and absolutely rip it. It's the excitement of the job, and it's also why you can't just lay back and just go through the motions, if you like, as an act. You've always got to be on your game. And just there's tiny little nuances I've noticed over the years. It can be the way you first enter the stage, how aggressive you can be. Sometimes, I mess about with the audience quite a bit when I first enter the stage and take the mickey out of people a little bit. Now, if you're with an audience that sometimes you can go in a little bit harsh too soon. I have done gigs abroad, and I've found at places like Germany, particularly Germans and Americans. I worked on an American cruise ship for a long time when I first started. I did like 2-4 month stints over in Miami. Yeah. Basically, I say cruise ship. It was more like a cross-channel ferry. It used to just go to the Bahamas and back. And then at night,
that beats Dover Calais.
Yeah, it does a little bit. But what happened? All the people who'd done it was like a day trip basically. So you go over to the Bahamas to entertain at night to the gamblers, and during the day to the tourists going over to the Bahamas. But what I used to find was fascinating with American audiences, we used to have a lot of guest comics who used to come on. And one of them was a guy called Lenny Windsor. I saw him the other week, actually. He was one of the old comedians from the old TV series, The Comedians in England. And he'd written for Benny Hill. And I always remember they used to mention this, writing for Benny Hill. And he'd get all the Americans, massive round of applause. And basically, if you watch it on any of the chat shows in America, as they run through the CV, if you like, when they do your introduction, they'll do you a big introduction, and the Americans are, whoa. In England, we just have a total different mentality. So you entertain on a cruise ship with a load of English people. You can read out that CV. The cruise director can then introduce you onto stage, read the same CV. And instead of entering to that from the American audience, you enter, don't care. It better be funny tonight. We English have a totally different attitude to entertainers, I think. And also, there's a phrase, I've said this to a lot of people. I think there's a phrase that we have in this country that I suspect certainly isn't a phrase in America. I'd never asked an American if it is, but I very much doubt it. The number of times as children we get told, stop showing off.
Yeah.
Get it all the time. Oh, just you're showing off now. Stop showing off to your friends. Stop showing off. Stop. And I bet in America they don't say that. And the difference is when that transmits then to stage. When I'm doing my juggling particularly, because it's a very visual thing. It's took hours and hours of practice, and I'll be juggling away with whatever I'm juggling. I'm juggling with 3 guitars. The English have that. There's underneath it's going, oh, he's showing off. Which is a kind of it's looked at as a negative thing.
Yeah.
Where in other cultures, it's applauded, isn't it?
Yeah, and it should be embraced and enhanced, I think, especially within children, to encourage that individuality and, to build that confidence. And it creates, people later on in life who do make a difference and feel very confident in making people happy. And that's a lovely quality. I was going to ask you, Steve, interestingly, can you remember the first time you felt funny, or that initial feeling you first got when you realised that being yourself would make other people feel better?
I distinctly remember getting cast as Rumpelstiltskin right, in a school play. It's the first school play. Back in my day, I was at Morehouse County Primary School in Milnrow, and it was the year sixes. What would it be then? No, yeah, it would be year 6, wouldn't it? So just before I leave for high school, that year, we were the ones who got to put on a play at the end of the year. And that particular year, it was Rumpelstiltskin. And he announced the cast. And whether it was because I was small in stature, funny looking at the time with them big ears, or whatever. But I got cast as Rumpelstiltskin. And I remember everyone laughing at me for being cast as Rumpelstiltskin, but underneath I was going, this is brilliant. I absolutely love it. And I still to this day remember the lines. I had to pop out my head through the little hole in the stage that was covered by a gym mat. That was supposed to. The gym mats were representing the flags in the cell in the story of Rumpelstiltskin, and the princess, is there locked into a cell with a pile of straw, and I'd then have to pop up and then swap the straw for the gold straw, which had got raffia paper. Right? So I'd swap the yellow raffia paper for the straw, put a pile down there and go, hello, pretty lady. Why are you crying? But I always remember putting a voice on and really going for it. And I just remember everyone laughing.
Yeah.
Big time. And I suppose at that instance, that was when I went, oh, this is a good feeling. This is a really, really good feeling.
And with regards kind of new material for your set, Steve, is it something you just pick up on a day-to-day basis? You'll see something and think, oh, that might work. Is it just little things that just make you chuckle?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 ways, I suppose. It's like you said, there's just small things that just make you laugh. It's a bit of a curse. I always say comics are then cursed. Once you start doing it for a living particularly, it becomes, and this is why some comics, probably myself at times, can be so annoying because we can't turn it off. And what I mean by that is, there's some situations, a number of times I've got 3 daughters and the wife, and we've been out, and sometimes I've said something, and Dad, not now. Do you know? Because I probably do speak inappropriately at times, just because it's that little switch in my head that's always on. It's always on to pick up on anything, a quick fire gag back to someone if they say something. People talk about, you're very quick-witted. And I just think that's just something that develops over time. I suppose some comics have it a lot younger and a lot quicker than others and don't develop it. It all stems from confidence. Does all that. It all stems from being confident on stage. But sometimes I can come off stage and think, flipping out, where did that come from? But then in terms of creating the material in the first place, so you get quick fire gags, things that you see that are funny, incidents, stories on the news that you think of from a different angle. Do you know what I mean? I think that's mad, that's crazy,
Yeah.
I know. And then the other side are actual real life stories. I'll give you an example, but because what you do with the story then is you embellish it and take it to extremes. And when you see a comic talk about, I was in the pub the other night, whatever happens next probably happened, but there'll be a huge amount of exaggeration involved in the story where you take it to imagine if she then ordered this drink or what. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'll give you an example of some old material that I used to do. Years ago, I used to talk about doing a gig in a prison. Did genuinely do a gig in a prison. And I used to do it. I had it's probably a 5-minute routine about the lady phoning me up. And the true element was the line that this lady said to me. She phoned me up and says, do we do charity gigs, Steve? And I said, well, it depends what the charity is. And she went, well, it's for Wymot Prison. And I said, for Wymot Prison? And she went, yeah, it's in Preston, Lancashire. I said, I know where it is. I said, but what do you mean for the prison? And she went, well, that's the charity. Entertain the prison. And I said, what, you mean I'm entertaining the prisoners? And she went, yes, but don't worry, it's only for the lifers. So I was like then going, so then when you then embellish that, I go, that's all right then. As long as I'm not entertaining petty thieves.
Yeah.
I can't be doing with them.
I want to watch me lose change.
Murderers, bring them home, we'll have a laugh with them fellas. All right? And then the story... So then you start embellishing it, and she did actually. She said, "Oh, well, if you could do 45 minutes, that'd be lovely, and you're welcome to stay for lunch." So then you start to embellish. I mean, what would the lunch be, right? What would you order in a prison? So then I had this idea. Oh, she orders in pizzas. So then you've got a guy, then in a situation where he's got to deliver pizzas to a prison. So never been more an intense delivery lad thinking, I hope I get on his little moped, going, I hope I get the order right. I hope I get the order right. I'm bugging if I get it wrong, and it would have been. You know what I mean? So then you just start building. And you just all the ridiculous things that you say about the gig, and then I used to always end it with another true part of the story, which this is why it stuck with me for so long, was at the end of that particular show. So I did genuinely do this gig in this prison, and it was fascinating. Actually, it was technically one of the murderers, I suppose. He came up to me and. He was, this, I think, what shocks you most, I think anyone, when you talk about crime in general, criminal, especially murderer, you have this image of someone unhinged in front, you know what I mean? A shaven head with scars on the face. There's something, but they're just anyone. These people were just anyone, tall, small, short, thin, fat. There's no... Do you know what I mean? They don't all have eyebrows that meet in the middle, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? So, so this one guy comes up to me, a lovely fella at the end, and he said, "Did you say you're from Oldham in your show?" I said, "Well, my family are from Oldham." Yeah, he says, "Yeah, I'm from Oldham." And then he went, "Do you remember the Jones Estate murders?" I went, "The Jones Estate murders." Now, when I say the story, I say I didn't remember him, but I didn't want to upset him, right? So I said, "Oh, the Joneses, of course I remember them. Terrible, dude. How long ago? 12 years ago. Is it 12 years?" And he went, "That were me, that." And this is what genuinely happened. I was already in the process of doing it at the time, but I shook his hand. You know when you do something automatically?
Yeah.
And I went,
completely.
well done. Well done. Shook his hand and said, well done. Thinking, you idiot. But I was already in that. That conversation was so quick. It was during the process of meeting someone. So he's literally come up going, "I did them murders in Oldham." And I'm like that. I'm already shaking his hand going, "Oh, my word. I'm congratulating this fella on a horrific crime." So this is what I mean about just embellishing stories and taking them in different directions. And I think that's when you talk about creativity. And then, of course, for me, the other element of my act is the juggling. Which I've always, obviously, I've always found it a bit of a curse, really, because I never felt like I've fitted in anywhere I go. If I get billed as a special act, I don't do much juggling in my act.
Yeah.
If you watch it, it's probably 2 to 3 minutes of juggling in a 45-minute set, right? So you get people who book me as a special act going, well, he's not really a special act, he's a comedian. And then I go on the comedy circuit, and because I end with the juggling with 3 guitars or the ping pong balls or whatever I end with.
Yeah, it's so
I
good.
get them looking at me going, he's just a juggler. He's a prop act, which get looked down upon. But what they don't realise, and I don't, especially in a comedy club, you can't go, all right, okay, we've had a laugh now. Watch this serious bit at the end. There's got to be a comedy element. The first reason I learnt to juggle was when I came out of university. So there's another line for you. I've got a degree.
Yeah.
I've got a degree in economic and social history.
I know. When you told me that, I was like, "What?" I mean,
I know.
What was the? So you've given your Rumpelstiltskin to critical acclaim at school.
Yeah.
Then you love that feeling of hearing the laughter, making people chuckle, which is a beautiful quality that you just have in abundance, Steve. But what was the route then? Was it your parents said, "Look, we get this side of your personality, we want to embrace that, but also let's have a little serious look at life here"?
No, I was never discouraged by my parents, but I was never encouraged either.
Yeah.
Going back to the 80s when. My parents were both teachers anyway, and education was first for them, understandably. You know what I mean? I was never. It was never thought of as a genuine career. People wouldn't think. The thought of me becoming a comedian, especially, it's absolutely ridiculous. There weren't many comedians about now. I mean, I always think people say nowadays it's a lot harder for young comics, and it is because there's so much competition. But back then, for comics, when I started doing comedy in the early year 2000, there weren't many comedy clubs. There were people. It wasn't really. Yeah. There were a couple of examples on telly, but back in the 80s, there were even fewer people doing stand-up. You had Billy Connolly. You could name them on one hand. You had Billy Connolly, Joe Pasquale did some wild stuff. You know what I mean? Freddie Starr, and then your comedians, your old school ones, like your Bernard Mannings and your Frank Carsons, and that was it. There weren't that many about that you actually saw. But for me personally, I wanted to go to. I thought at the time, even though I enjoyed the laughs, it was the performing that I wanted to do. Yeah. And so I went down the acting route. So I went to this 2-week class, and it was just, we put on a little show at the end of it all. I remember I learnt to mime. I remember there was a guy, that was his speciality. I'd love to meet the fella now. But I remember him giving us, this is the first thing I ever learnt in acting. And he says, right, we're going to do mime today. Now, everyone mime eating an apple. Right. And he goes, so everyone would go, everyone's doing this, going, some eating it quicker than others, etc. It's great. Now then, here's a tricky one for you kids. I'm eating a peach. Right. And everyone would go, all right. So everyone would go, ah. And instantly he just went, no. Let me demonstrate. And then he was in his element, and he went, here's me eating an apple. Now, here's me eating a peach. That is the difference. That finger of wiping the juice apparently is the difference for a mime artist between eating an apple and eating a peach. Is when you eat the peach, it's juicier. So you have to do that.
Hey,
that was
listen,
it. Yeah, that's what I came away with from those workshops.
Well, if I'm in Tesco later, Steve, near the fruit and veg, and there's a guy dressed all in black miming eating fruit, I'm going to go, do you know Steve Royle?
And they then
that's
publicised
funny.
the fact you could go to Oldham Theatre Workshop. And Oldham Theatre Workshop at the time was just sort of growing. It had just moved into these new premises. And the week, I think it might have been the week I started, a couple of the members of this Oldham Theatre Workshop. It was a council-funded thing. It was free for people in the area, and it produced some amazing child stars who went on to do great things. I mean, people who went through Oldham Theatre Workshop at the time. I remember I'd only been there a couple of days or weeks, like I said, that Michael Lavelle, or Michael Turner as he was back then, he got onto Coronation Street. There was Anne Kirkbride. She'd been to the Oldham Theatre Workshop, and then went on to play Deirdre Barlow, of course. And then I was one of my first girlfriends was Sally Ann Matthews. Matthews, she's still in it now. She's gone back into it more recently. And then there was Anna Friel, went to Oldham Theatre Workshop. Wow. Saran Jones was it. I did a production with Saran Jones back in the day.
Isn't it?
I knew I wanted to perform. But like I said, I had these parents who, and myself really thinking it's not realistic. Go for a realistic career. So I thought, well, I'd seen my mum and dad. I've always emulated my dad. I love my dad. He's the most amazing, cleverest. Everything about him is just perfect. I've always wanted to be my dad, I suppose, in some respects. Although he never performed, he would have been a brilliant comic.
With Phoenix Nights, had Peter Kay spotted your act before he cast you?
Yeah. What the mad thing with Phoenix? Well, the mad thing in my relationship with Peter, if you like, is that I in 1999, I did my first big TV program, if you like. It was called Give Your Mate a Break. Les Dennis presented it. And I was genuinely surprised by this. Basically, Les Dennis would turn up at people's places. So like a forerunner to BG, to Britain's Got Talent, really.
Okay.
Where Les Dennis would turn up at places and work. He'd like have a lady working behind a till at Tesco's, and he'd turn up with the old film crew. You're here, Maureen, you're a brilliant singer. Come on, we'll get you down to Granada Studios and work on your act. And they did this for me. Even though I was an entertainer, they came into I was doing medieval banquets at the time. And I was entertaining at a medieval banquet one night, and through these curtains, Les Dennis and a full film crew came in. Hi, Steve, you're coming with us now down to Manchester for a week. We're working on your act. We've got an expert to work with you. It was Paul Zenon. And Paul Zenon, the magician, worked with my act for a week. The concept fell foul on comics and people like that with me, because what they tried to do is try to create a new act to present on telly, on live telly on the Saturday night. Problem with that, of course, is people like myself had honed our acts over many years. So you're suddenly then trying to do a new act, which is never going to be as good because that's the owned one. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
That's the idea sort of collapsed, and it only ever did one series, did Give Your Mate a Break. But part of the programme, they said, we noticed you've worked on cruise ships, you've worked in theme parks, you've worked in theatres, and I'd just done my first couple of pantomimes at the time. Said, what we had never done is a comedy club. So they booked me to do a 6-minute spot at the Frog and Bucket Comedy Club in Manchester.
Wow.
So I went on, the full film crew there. It was mad. So the pressure was on me.
Jeez,
and I remember the
massively.
compere went on, and everyone was expecting me to die. I think they wanted me to die in front of because this is a tough crowd, proper old,
Yeah.
I mean, the Frog and Bucket has always been a feisty club, but it's the first one I've ever done, and I love it. And I ended up doing 12 minutes, way over my time. Absolutely loved it. And the guy who runs it, Dave Perkin, lovely guy, and he booked me then immediately to do a weekend the year after.
Amazing.
So that was my first ever weekend at the comedy club. And while that weekend, so technically I'd done one comedy club gig. After my first gig, Neil Fitzmaurice, or it was called Neil Anthony at the time, Neil Fitzmaurice, who co-wrote Phoenix Nights with Dave, Spikey and Peter Kay.
Yeah.
He was obviously good friends with Peter Kay. He said Peter Kay's looking for someone for his next tour. Now, Peter Kay wasn't a big name at the time. He was only doing small little theatre tour, And he'd just done that Peter Kay thing on telly, which I'd watched, and I was a big fan. And I thought, he's brilliant, him. Yeah. And then Peter Kay came down the next night to watch me. Well, Peter came into the comedy club. He watched my act, came backstage, going, Steve, I'd love you to go on tour with me. Absolutely, love what you do. He then went on stage and tested out some new material, which was garlic bread and tea Egypt.
No way.
Yeah. So I saw him do that for the very first time because he was practicing this ready for his tour. And then I did a few tour dates with him on the next tour. And then the thing with Peter is he's very loyal to his friends. And he's just, you notice he doesn't do many interviews. He won't chat to other people. But when you're in the privilege of his company, he's family in more ways than one. He's obviously very keen with his own family and very tight-knit, but also people around him. If he has trust in you, he's the nicest and most encouraging guy. He's given me so much advice over the years. I like to think I've given him a bit of help as well, what I mean? But as a result of that, he's always kept me in mind for everything. Yeah. So everything he's done, I've had a little part. I always wish I'd got bigger parts, but at the time, the Phoenix Nights one was obviously the juggling at the end of that one episode. But then when it came to the Phoenix Nights live shows, Celebrate 15 years, which was about in 2015, we did the Phoenix Nights live shows at the arena. Peter phoned me up and said, look, we've always thought you'd be one of the team, you're one of the Phoenix Nights. He said, we'd love you to be in the show. The only thing is there's no money. So we're going, all right, but you're not going to turn Peter down. So it was for comic relief. And in the end, even though I made no money, and we performed for 16 shows, 15,000 people each show. It was just an amazing experience to do that. Yeah. And with your mates as well, because by then, obviously, 15 years into doing stand-up, everyone in Phoenix Nights were all stand-up comics. It was Toby, Steve Edge, Archie Kelly, Dave Spikey, a close friend, of course, and all the acts are in it. Justin Morehouse is one of my closest friends. We just had a laugh. We just had a laugh for 2 weeks at the Manchester Arena, and raised, nearly £6 million for Comic Relief. I think to this day, it's the still biggest single fundraiser for Comic Relief that they've ever had. And obviously, Max and Paddy, I got cast in Max and Paddy. There's a little story, I'll tell you quickly, the little story with the Max and Paddy. I played a character called Munster, and it was like in his school reunion scene. And my lines were, I'm saying nothing, me. I'm saying nothing. So every time they ask me something, I go, oh, hey, I'm saying nothing, me.
Yeah.
The irony is, I actually said something, but all I said was, I'm saying nothing. That was it. The reason I was there on set that day was Reece Shearsmith, his wife at the time, was pregnant, and she was due to give birth. So they didn't know, Peter didn't know whether he'd be able to make the film in or not.
Okay.
So I learned all. Peter phoned me up and said, would I learn all of Reece Shearsmith's part in case Reece couldn't make it? So, us performers like going, go on, give birth, go on, don't be here, don't be here.
Push it out. Yeah,
and then at the last minute, I turned up and I was dressed as Reece Shearsmith's character, and in the end, Reece turned up and Peter went, I feel awful now, Steve. I'll write you in. I had this character called Munster who was going to be in it. So he put me in that scene. Otherwise, I might not have been in Max and Paddy. And then the other one you've got to look out for is in Car Share. In Car Share, again, Peter's thinking of me. In Car Share, I'm his mate who he speaks to on the phone in the band. And in actual fact, because that one was recorded in my kitchen here, right in here.
Really? My God.
Well, Peter's saying, I was supposed to go down to Manchester to do the filming or recording, because obviously I'm just a voice on the radio. And Peter phoned up going, why have they got you going to Manchester? He says, it's going to be on a phone. He said, we're only going to have to put an effect on it to make it sound like you're on a phone. He says, why don't we just do it on a phone? So that's what we did. We just put it on my hands free on my phone, and I just read the lines down phone to him, and that was it. Just did it here in my kitchen. And then it's on national television winning awards.
Oh, that's brilliant. What I love, Steve, is, you mentioned how nice it is that Peter Kay keeps using you, but never forget, Steve, what a great guy you are to work with. Not just to work with, but to be around. And I remember many moments in rehearsals with you, just having a laugh, and that's so important to do if you can, isn't it? Whatever you do in life.
Yeah, but you know that you're like me in that respect, even more so, mate. You're so. I mean, I don't think you know your funny bones.
I don't think I do.
I don't think you do. I would say, if I had to give you any, listen, this is me. I can't give you any advice because you've done more experience than me. But
I'm all open to learning. I promise you.
I don't think you have as much confidence. Project how funny you are when you're on stage. I think you suddenly become that. You suddenly start thinking of the character more funny, and I think it's that far away from having the total confidence. But it all goes back to that. The key elements being just confidence. But in the real, you are such a funny guy to be around. But I think, listen, just between two nice blokes talking to each other here, I think it's just good to be nice, isn't it?
Oh,
why would you not want to be nice to other people in your life? That, I think, again, probably my mum and dad instilled me that from a small age, from a young age. I've never seen anyone really benefit from being horrible.
I know, and it can be so draining, and it's likewise, Steve. I'm all about, and if you can make somebody just feel a little bit happier, it's just lovely, and you get so much from it yourself, don't you?
Yeah,
and I think it's unbelievable. It's so simple, but so important.
It bounces so far down the line.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of pantomime. Really, everyone's from a different background. So suddenly, you have people like yourself, like me, who just like to have a laugh. Suddenly, it relaxes a whole room. And then when that room's when
it's a ripple effect.
When your fellow performers are happy, they're going out with smiles. So they're seeing the person on the stage door. They've got a smile on their face. The stage door then goes into the theatre to check if everyone's ready. They've got a smile on their face, and that smile, and this smile passes on. And eventually, you've won because everyone's in a happy position. Dude, why be nasty? And more importantly, just spread the joy like we do, mate. Just have a life's about having a laugh. If you get as many laughs as you can out of it, that's what it's about.
I just love. And going through, Steve, the process of Britain's Got Talent, how that must have given you a really good sort of confidence boost during the tricky time of COVID. Was it everything you expected to be? And your career afterwards, has it been different to you expected to be on the back of that?
It's been way more than I expected it to be.
Amazing.
I mean, the daft thing is, I kick myself now that I should have done it. I was actually originally asked 10 years before I did it. So I think it was about the 4th or 5th series. And I got invited down to London to meet the producers, and they spent an hour. I spent an hour with like Simon Cowell's right-hand man, if you like.
Right.
And we chatted about it, and they were going to put me in that year, and then pulled me from the show at the last minute. And I said, well, look, if you're pulling me from the show, I'll never do it again. And they said, oh, no, don't be like that, Steve. It's just that we've got enough comics this year. We don't want... And I got a bit uppity about it. And then for 10 years, then they phoned me up every year saying, will you do it? And I said, no, it's not for me. Because I had the mentality of I don't want to be judged by 4 people. I'll be judged by an audience. I'm not being judged by 4 people. Their opinions don't really matter to me. That kind of attitude I had. But then what happened that year, it's mad now, isn't it, when you think about it? So it was 2020, the year I did BGT. And first of all, which is the ridiculous element, I thought, that's got a good ring to it. 2020. Sounds like it's going to be a great year. How wrong could we be?
Yeah.
I said I just decided just to go for it. It's good. And when I went on that stage, I still had the mentality of I'm not entertaining the judges, I'm entertaining the audience.
Yeah.
Which is a weird mentality to be in, because when we talked about this earlier, so I did that in the auditions and it worked brilliantly. I got my 4 yeses. But then when the semi-final came along, obviously we didn't even know we'd be able to finish the semi-final. And by the time it did, there was no audience at all. So suddenly for me, always doing that show to entertain them and not the 4 judges, suddenly my only option was just to entertain the 4 judges. And so suddenly, well, the other thing is, when I did it, and this is what worked to my advantage, what a lot of people talk about when they say, oh, you were so a breath of fresh air, or you know, I get some lovely comments, and very, very nice bit. And also because I did do it in pandemic, people coming up to me. I've had grown men coming up to me going, oh, you were the best thing in COVID for me. You know, you got me through a difficult time.
Oh,
and
that's
you're
brilliant.
making me laugh. I mean, honestly, it genuinely touches my heart, you know.
Completely.
That some people found me really... Because there wasn't much new on telly, was there? Nothing was being made at the time. So it was one of the few things that you could... You know, and so, you know, I went on stage and I just wanted to enjoy it. I've done enough television in the past, and whenever I've done little TV appearances and stuff, I've always had a stress or a worry that it's not going to work out or I'm going to mess up. And I went, well, who does that affect? Only you. That mentality doesn't do. Just go on, just enjoy it. So I did exactly like we do with Panto rehearsals. I turned up on day 1 for their auditions and chatted with everyone. I had a laugh. I just said, look, we're all having a laugh in this together. So I was joking with the researchers who were there. And it bounces down. And then wanted to laugh again because we've been through such a tough year. By the time the final was in October, so it was a long time after the pandemic had begun and back in the March. And we'd had months of, you know, just everyone being through, including myself. I mean, I think I broke down in the semi-finals, you see on the telly. I mean, I started weeping a little bit because it was at a time where I just didn't think, and anyone in entertainment was going through the same feelings, but I had a wife and 3 children who've always relied on me, and I've always been proud that from that moment I, you know, got that job at Granada Studios all those years ago. Entertainment has kept me in work. I've been lucky enough never to need a normal job, and suddenly there were these pressures and I've been told by Rishi Sunak at the time as well. I managed to get a dig at him in the semi-final, final, I think it was. It was a time where he was saying, you need to retrain, get a new job. And you're going, what? But this is all I do. You wouldn't, no one would employ this.
I love to ask all my guests, what's on your dinner menu tonight? We're in Benjy's Cafe. What's for grub tonight?
I'm a bit of a culinary whiz, so I'll tell you what we're having tonight, only because I made it 2 nights ago. I made onion barges.
Oh,
homemade ones. Nice. I just followed the recipe, and I tell you what, they're absolutely bang on, right? And
bloody hell!
I made a salmon masala. It's quite simple. Nice. Again, it's just only a simple recipe, but hey, I'm a bit of a whiz when it comes to the cooking. Nice. So yeah, we'll be having salmon. I bet you don't have. I bet you've not had that before, have you?
No. Steve, I'm so grateful of you popping into Benjy's Cafe for this episode. You're a great guy. You are extremely talented. You are naturally funny. And you know what? You're just a great chap. And it's been really lovely to chat to you this morning.
Thank you so much. I'm back at you, mate. You're a lovely fella.
Cheers, Steve. Have a great day.
And you, mate.
Thanks for joining me in Benjy's Cafe. What a happy chat with Steve. Make sure you hit follow so every episode gets sent straight to your phone. No booking required, available wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget, a new episode every Tuesday. In episode 14, I'll be joined by the broadcaster, author and teacher, Bobby Seagull. I'll get the kettle on. Have a great day.